Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are having a look at the French G discounts when it comes to a lot of their vehicles, and we'll be splitting it up once again into its relevant sections. When it comes to the army side of the French, they actually have some really nice premiums for GE. One of them is actually available in the actual Warbond shop right now, the AMX13 M24. So if you're not going to grind it out in the Warbond shop, this one's really good, but I would just say grind it out in the Warbond shop. The H39, which is right here, don't bother with this one. Just understand this, right? So the French ground tech tree is my favorite ground tech tree when it comes to the game. But in order to enjoy its various fruits, you have to get through rank 1. Rank 1 is absolutely terrible for France. It is probably the worst rank of any vehicle in the game. But once you get to rank 2, you get a bunch of really fun vehicles. So this is your test. Can you break through this? If you do break through this, then you get the wonderful, vehicles that are here. So don't worry about the H39 because it's very bad, and you're just going to waste your money. The B1 Ter, though, is not a bad pickup. It's not as strong as it used to be because they upped its BR to 2.7. So if you're getting an up tier, it's actually really weak because people can just pen your front area, so they can just pen this. It's only 71 millimeters. Another thing is, since Sweden's very popular right now, the APDS just eats this thing alive. The difference between the B1 Ter and the B1 Bis is the B1 Ter has an extra crew member, and also I believe it has a bit of extra armor as well. So it's a little bit easier to use than the standard B1 Bis, but even though this thing used to be a powerhouse, it's really only very BR dependent. If you get down tiered, it's very strong. If you play out your tier, it's very strong. If you get up tiered, then you get annihilated. So I would actually say it's probably not worth it. The MX13 M24, though, is definitely worth it. Even though it's rank 2, you can run it in a pretty nice rank 3 lineup. This has the AMX13 chassis with the Chaffee turret. It does get the vertical stabilizer of the 75mm for the Americans, so you can always fire first. It gets a 50 cal as well, and also a really nice smoke grenade launcher, so you can reposition really effectively. Has a crew of 4, so if your turret gets popped, you die, but because this thing is a scout, you can... Oh, that must be the... that must be the content creator stuff. Well, there you go. So, so when it comes to the AMX13 M24, you have scouting. So if you're in a matchup where you're not sure what to do, or you get fully uptied into KV1s, IS5s and stuff like that, you still can scout them for your team. You still can easily get into a plane. And also you have the M61 shot, which is super good for the 75. If you pen, it kills whatever it kills, and it has very good pen on it as well, thanks to the Damar formula change. So this thing is really nice. It's one of my favorite light tanks in the game, and being part of that 3-7 lineup is just super fun. You have the ARL ACL1, you have the M4A4, both work really well, and then you also have the M10 that you can throw in if you need a bit of extra firepower. So this is really good. Highly recommend it. Also, the M4A1 FL10. Now, this does have a banger lineup. You've got the M4A4 SE50, and you've got the EBR 1951. Both are fantastic vehicles in their own right, and at 5.0, you also have access to the P63 C5 and the C-Fire for air dominance. I don't really like the C-Fire, but it's still pretty decent in this setup. The FL10, if you take some of the best factors of the of the Americans and basically mix it with the French, you get the FL10. It's got the oscillating turret, it's got an auto-loaded 75mm, which has insanely good penetration on the rounds for its BR. This thing has the POT 51A round, which pens up to 182mm, and also a 5-second reload, so you pretty much out-reload everything that you face at this BR, which makes it really strong. It's also pretty cheap when it's 50% off, so definitely worth it. The smoke grenades are really good as well, and also gets artillery since it's a medium tank. So this thing has a very strong lineup. Its only real weakness, I suppose, is its armor, but because of how the turret works, because of how the gun works, you should always be able to get the first shot off and also be mobile enough to be able to get into good places. The only issue with it is it can't really reverse, but why do you need reverse when you have a 5-second autoloader with 12 pieces of ammunition backing it up? It also, if its turret gets popped, it still lives, because it has the 4-man crew, so it works really, really well. This is a fantastic vehicle. It's been great since it has been released, since even before the French tech tree was a thing. The Panther Dauphiné is also here at 5.7. This kind of has a bit of a problem with it. It's a little bit better than it was before, but the major issue with the Dauphiné is it doesn't really have a lineup. You have the M36B2 now, the ARL44 as well, so if you want to run a decent tank destroyer lineup, you can, but it just doesn't have good support from the air. It doesn't really have good support anywhere. The Panther, it's just a standard Panther, nothing too crazy about it. This was used by the French during the Second World War as a captured vehicle. Maybe they'll get a Tiger in the future as well. It does have the good turret rotation, so it isn't like the Panther D. It's more like the A and the G, and generally it's a good vehicle. The Panther is not a bad vehicle in the game. It works very, very well. It's just the fact that what you see here is kind of what you get. It's a very standard vehicle, nothing too crazy, and it'll do well for you, but it's not as if it's going to destroy worlds or anything. There are much better options in the tech tree. But if you're looking for a bog standard vehicle at rank 4, I suppose the Panther's not a bad one. There's just better options. The AMX-13 SS11, I believe nowadays this one is a GE vehicle. Used to be a pack vehicle. It's pretty much just an AMX-13. The SS11 part of it is a gimmick. It doesn't actually add anything really to the vehicle. They are they're keyboard guided missiles, which pretty much means that you have to be stationary while firing them, and also because of where they are actually on the vehicle, you cannot hide yourself while also using the missiles. So the actual general use of them is very limited compared to other things. What you want to be in this vehicle is you want to kind of hide, scout things since it's a light tank, and then take your opportunities with the gun when you can. That's what you do with the standard AMX-13, and it works very, very well. With the SS11, you can't do that if you want to use the ATGMs. So you just kind of push yourself out there, and then you just die. So the missiles are just an exposed ammo rack, which will mean that you'll die to artillery more. I really don't like this vehicle. I think the lineup for France at 6.7 is already good enough, with the AMX-13 and the AMX-M4, and also one of the tank destroyers to come along with, so I don't think it's worth it. The AMX-30, though, I think is worth a consideration because of the fact that the lineup's really good, and also because of the fact that it can research a lot of the tech tree since it's a rank 5. You have the AMX-30 1972, the AMX-50 Surbasset, the Lorraine 40T, the AMX-13 90, the AMX-50 other name one, and then also the Foch. The 7.7 lineup for France is insane. The 8.3 lineup for France is also insane, and this thing has really good rewards on it as well. The only difference between this and the standard tech tree one is it doesn't have a coaxial 20, it only has a 12.7, which does mean that it's weaker than the standard tech tree one, but also it gets those better rewards. So it's kind of a trade-off depending on what you want. This gun fires a heat shell, which is probably one of the best heat shells in the game for its BR, and also being at 7.7, even though it doesn't have a stabilizer, as long as you don't get into that 8.387 bracket too much, it can do a lot of work. This thing is super fun to play, highly mobile, and surprisingly survivable, because it has these annoying fuel tanks in here which soak rounds, and also because you have to punch hard to get through to the first stage ammo stowage through the front of the gun. It's very hard to kind of like take this thing out, and also if you're playing this correctly, you'll always get the first shot off. So this is really nice. I mean, technically the lineup doesn't need it because it's already super strong, but this will be a lineup that you will use to be able to grind out the rest of the tech tree, right? Apart from the top tier Leclercs, which right now are not in a great place because they don't have a lot of extra stuff, same with a lot of the other lineups. But for France, 8.3 and 7.7 are like two meta buckets of vehicles. Those are the ones that you like push forward with. The only reason I haven't bought the AMX-30 is because when it came out, I already had all these vehicles, so there wasn't really a use for it. But if I was grinding through the tech tree and I was at like rank 4 with the 7.3s and the 7.7s, I would definitely pick this up because it's a great addition to the lineup. And the AMX-30 Super, which will probably be on sale, and also the Samoa, which will be on sale. The Super doesn't have a lineup, even though it's a very strong vehicle. You have to solo carry in it, and the Samoa is a really good pickup. But at the same time, I would actually prefer the AMX-30 just because of 7.7, and also at 7.7 you have good support from the air. You have stuff like the F-84G you can bring in, and also the MD-450 series as well. So not too shabby at all. For French helicopters, you have one option, and that is the EC665 Tiger HAP. This one is at 10.0, and I don't really think it's one of the strongest things at 10.0. It will get you to the Tiger HAD though, if that's what you want to get access to. But generally, the French tech tree for helicopters is very weak. The H-34 is okay. The Alouettes are okay. The Gazelles are absolutely terrible. They don't have enough armament or anything like that. And the HAD's alright as well. But I think when it comes to CAS, the other options are generally better for France itself. At 10.0, you also don't really have a ground lineup to run with, so you're kind of limited to heli PvE or trying to solo carry in this thing, which is not going to go well for the vehicle itself. It does have thermals, it does have the Stingers, and of course the Mistrals. The Mistrals are obviously a lot better than the Stingers, just because they have better overload, and also generally just go faster and last longer. So, you know, the Mistrals are better. And then you also have the Hot 3s. The Hot 3s are pretty decent missiles. You only get 8 of them overall, though. You can use the custom loadouts in this thing, which is quite nice compared to others, and you do get a ton of snebs if you want to use them in different scenarios. Also, you get the gun, the 30mm, which is nice, and the countermeasures. It has everything that like standard 10.0 helicopters get. It's just the fact that this thing doesn't have a lineup with it, which really makes it kind of annoying, because if it did have a lineup, like Sweden has the Mi-28A with its lineup, then yes, it would be worth it. But I think because of that, the only reason to get this is to actually research the HAD, and that's not a good enough reason. For French aviation, there's some decent premiums, but one thing has to be understood about French aviation. A lot of the tech tree is not very good, so the reason to pick up premiums is to get past a lot of the pretty gaff vehicles. You know, the rank 1's not great. The bombers are alright, especially the Farman. The Farman and the NC-223 are pretty good, but everything else apart from the H-75s is not in a great position. Usually most of these are pretty bad. The VG-33C is not bad, but everything else is super rough. So what I would say is stuff like the Lafayette is a pretty decent vehicle to pick up. Obviously you got Paula's as well, but I wouldn't bother with it. It's not good apart from an arcade. But the Lafayette is a standard P40F5. It works very well. Generally, I think I've done pretty well in the thing, just because it's a little bit easier to play. And then also, at the same time, what you get out of it, 17 and 2 and 6 battles, is you can also use it in ground, because it gets access to a 500-pounder and also 100-pounders as well. So it also has the 50 cals. 50 cals pen a lot now. You can pen a lot of Panzer 4s and 3s through the roof, and also other things in that way. So it can be very effective for you. I would say the P40s in general work really well in this game. They're generally mid-altitude vehicles, which can then force people down and then out-energy fight them. And with the 50 cals, especially with the amount of ammunition you have, you can really do very well in it. It also gets an extra skin, but it only adds like the cricket here, and that's basically it. So yeah, it's not really worth it in my opinion. But yeah, it's a very good plane to be able to grind out the early ranks to get through a lot of that stuff. Same with the Yak 3 and the P47. So both of these vehicles are very good in air realistic. They have different playstyles. The Yak 3 is a mid-altitude fighter that you force people down in, and then you beat them at low altitude and low energy. That's generally how this thing works. It works very well. There's only a few aircraft that do what it do better, especially stuff like Spitfires. Also with the 20mm, it pens 28 once again, so you can pen the top of things. This thing is also very useful in stuff like ground forces, because you can use it as an air superiority fighter, as long as you are good, at aiming the cannons, basically. The other thing is you have the 100 octane fuel usage, so you have a bit of extra energy power, which is quite nice on it. So yeah, I really like this thing in Air Realistic. I think it flies very nicely. You get beaten at high altitudes, so just don't take it to high altitudes. Nowadays, the meta in Air Realistic is more mid to low altitude, so that doesn't really matter as much. Then you got the P-47D. So this is a Razorback P-47, ton of ammunition on it, a big old engine. Once again, you need patience in this thing in Air Realistic, so you want to get to high altitudes and then force everything down. If there's anything that is better at high altitudes than you have to take head-ons and you have to be confident in them. If you can't take the head-ons or you're not confident in them, then you're just going to die. So that's one of the problems with it. But generally, it's a good vehicle. It's one of those which has a lot of endurance, has a lot of fuel, has a lot of ammo. You just need a bit of patience to go from there. It can literally clean up games very, very easily, get 4 or 5 or 6 kills without even thinking. It also has a really good secondary loadout for ground forces, 2 1000s and a 500, so these two drop together, and then the 500 separately, so you can get two. You can get at least 1 guaranteed ground kill, and then 2 pretty easy ones, and then also the 50 cals on top of it to do air superiority, or also take out AAs. It's just a really, really nice vehicle. All the P-47s are great multi-role vehicles, and if French Naval ever comes out, this will definitely be a great pickup. The Naval is not really a great pickup. It's one which now gets an air spawn, which definitely helps it out. But in ground forces, it gets access to do 1000s, which is quite nice. But as we talked about, you don't really have a 5-7 lineup in ground, so it doesn't really work very well. And one of the major issues of this thing, it has a ton of armament, so 620mm, which is really nice, but its flight performance is terrible. So if you're not going after stuff like bombers and you're having to energy fight or turn fight other fighters or even twin engines, this thing really struggles. It's one of those which the stat card just lies to you. It's not a powerful vehicle. It doesn't work very well at all. It relies a lot on its armament, and that's really about it. At 5.7, there's a lot of very good air superiority fighters, and they'll just eat you alive because you just do not have the energy. You do not have the energy retention because this thing is heavy as all hell with its contra prop on it. But it is at least kind of a unique vehicle, I suppose. But that's really about it. It's definitely not worth the cost of it. The AD4NA though, which is exactly the same price, if you haven't ground out the F4U7 or you haven't ground out the standard AU4, this one is actually a really good pickup for those 6.3, 6.7, 7.0, 7.3 lineups for ground, and also just for general grinding in Air Realistic or Air Arcade. It has access to the 420mm. If you don't run any secondary ordnance on it, it's a pretty decent fighter, funnily enough. Has a very good 1 or 2 turns, and then it kind of just loses all energy, so you die. So as long as you, as long as you are able to kill something in 1 or 2 turns, you can win the fight, which is quite good. The actual AD4NA in general does also get some really nice secondary loadouts. So you got a bunch of rockets which can take out a lot of ground, targets in Air Realistic. You have the T10 151s and also the T10 140s. Obviously, the 140s have high explosive mass. The 151s have high penetration. So depending on what you want to use, they can do really well. And you also get access to a 2,000 pounder and also 1,000 pounders, depending on what loadouts you want to bring along. I feel like this vehicle will eventually get custom loadouts as well, so you can make a really nice loadout on top of everything. And also you have a torpedo, so once again, if French Naval ever comes out, this will be a really nice pickup. It has really high rewards on it as well for what it's designed to do, which is of course ground pound and stuff like Air Realistic. You'll die quite a lot, but you'll also be able to get a lot of ground targets and a lot of RP and SL. And since this thing does not have a very high repair cost, only 2,500, you can just count the SL that you make in it as well. So that's also quite a nice thing about it. So I would say if you're looking to pick something up, the AD4NA, the P47, and then also the Lafayette are all very good pickups, especially if you don't want to grind through a lot of the dud vehicles of the French tech tree. Once you get to about here, though, in the French tech tree, it's completely fine. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. And nowadays, with the higher tier stuff, there's some really nice vehicles, like the Mirage 3s, the Mirage 5, and also the F1s and the 2000s. So there is at least a light at the end of the tunnel. As always, though, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank Forge, Siegebreak, Carrion Crow, Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, and also Sem Arslan, Wilkski, Uncle Bean, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.